Terry Slavens from South Island Prosperity Partnership. Welcome to the CHEK News Spotlight. Today, I'm very excited because we're talking about Mainstreet's comeback with Mary Rowe, CEO of the Canadian Urban Institute, and Kathy Whitcher, Executive Director of the Urban Development Institute here in the Capital Region. So Mary, I'm going to start with you. You work with cities and towns across Canada. What are you hearing about our Main Streets? How are they doing? And has COVID changed them forever?
Well, I think, Main Streets were struggling a little bit before. I mean, this pandemic is arriving in our lives at a time that a whole bunch of other significant societal changes are arriving too. So technology was the first, and well, actually probably wasn't the first. The first was probably globalization. We've had trade agreements, and we've had offshoring of manufacturing, and lots of businesses that have been developing, so that we've had more of a globalized marketplace. So our supply chains are bigger, things are getting produced in different places, and then they come back. And so the world got much bigger economically over the last 2-3 decades. And on top of that, technology has just accelerated. And so it's really easy now to sit at a terminal and order things and do your business electronically without actually speaking to somebody and or actually being in the presence of somebody. And we don't even use the phone anymore. I think that all of that was happening before COVID. Then COVID happens, and suddenly we're not traveling as much. We're not getting on transit to go downtown. We're constrained to be maybe only in our dwelling, or we are being asked to minimize unnecessary travel. So I think what it's done is it's sort of put us back on our heels to say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to go across town to get something, or I'm not going to, but what do I need? Well, I need some fresh air, and I need to be able to get something more locally. And I'll tell you that the sort of frivolous example, it's serious, I suppose, but was this run on toilet paper at the beginning. I tell this story about people when suddenly there was no toilet paper, and people were freaked out there was no toilet paper. And if you tried to get toilet paper on Amazon, even, you were waiting weeks, and your big grocery stores were out of toilet paper. But you know who still had toilet paper? My little corner variety store. He had toilet paper. And I remember thinking, isn't that interesting that his supply chain, and this is a ethnically owned corner store where you buy a lottery ticket, but they've also, like, I can get a soybean paste in there, and I can get rice vinegar, and I tease them about the obscure things that they have in there. So I think that the point that I hear across the country is that, yes, Main Street businesses were already struggling because a lot of people were buying more and more using computers and buying things digitally. And they weren't necessarily buying from them digitally. They were buying from some large warehouse outfit that shall remain nameless that operates out of the United States. So that was already happening. And I think that COVID then just accelerated. It's kind of brought all that to a head. So now what we're having an opportunity to do is really think carefully, how do we spend our money? And where do we want to spend our time? And if we're not commuting to work as much as, or we're not coming as much as we used to, does that give us an opportunity to actually vote with our feet in a different kind of way, and actually take our consumer dollars and spend them within 4, 5, 6, 8 blocks of our abode? And if we don't have places locally that we want to shop at, then is it an opportunity for new businesses to open? Because there would be a local market. We did block studies in 8 communities across the country as part of Bring Back Main Street, big campaign that COI has been running. And what we found is that if a local business on a main street had a local clientele, so that might be that they had a product that was particular to an ethnicity, and that local community might have had a certain ethnic makeup, and those people went to that store. Or it could have been that it was just a store that had a kind of niche set of products that locals wanted. Those businesses that had deep attachments to local consumers have done pretty well. They've survived. The ones that are more challenged are the ones that the offering wasn't unique. The chains are the first to close. I think we can all anecdotally report this, that the businesses that are closing near us on Main Streets are often chains, and those decisions are not being made in the local community. They're being made at some head office, which is out in another part of the country. So
we're seeing this with Le Chateau just announces closing, all kinds of things. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, and I want you to delve into this more. But before I do, Kathy Whitcher, from Urban Development Institute. You live here, you work here, you're a longtime resident. And I want to ask you, you work with a lot of real estate developers, real estate professionals, and I know you keep your eyes on what's happening in our downtown core and our commercial districts. So what is your assessment of where we are in the South Island region for our main streets right now? And are you seeing notes of optimism?
Um, yeah, yeah, definitely. There is definitely notes of optimism. I think there's also a lot of hope out there. There's certain, the development industry has ebbs and flows, and with the pandemic, we've had banks tightening up their restrictions and people losing jobs. So developers are a little concerned about pre-sales and things like that, but overall, I mean, our industry was deemed, construction industry was deemed an essential service, and actually BC is one of the only provinces that we just kept going. We did not miss a beat with that. And kudos to everybody in that industry who adapted to having on-site hand washing stations and wearing masks and so on, bringing in protocols. So I mean, it's definitely, it's difficult right now, but there, I think there's hope for sure.
Exactly. And, interestingly enough, Mary, I don't know if you can speak to this as well, but as Kathy knows, downtown Victoria for the city proper is really considered a downtown for an entire region of, many, many municipalities. So it has all the pressures and all the good stuff of an entire region coming in. Are you seeing, so our main street is impacted by multiple issues as well. Are you seeing this in other regions, and how are they dealing with it, when you're a regional downtown?
As you suggest, you're a regional center. The other thing is that you're a port. So you right off the bat have a different dynamic. And of course, the port's closed more or less. I mean, it's not closed to domestic travel, but it's closed to American travel. And the other thing is that you had a strong tourism economy. So communities that had strong relationships to tourism and particularly offshore tourism, are experiencing real challenge. If communities have been able to stimulate local tourism, domestic tourism to replace it, great. But I, for instance, work closely with Fogo Island off the northeast coast of Newfoundland, and they're completely dependent on foreign travel, U.S. travel, and travel outside of, not all, that's not true. They have lots of domestic travel from Canada, but not from the maritime provinces. And because of the maritime bubble, they've been completely constrained. So I can appreciate that there are different demands on you because you're the regional center. The other thing is that there are all sorts of government services that you would have as a government town. And of course, lots of those services are no longer being offered in person either. They're now being offered online, or they're being suspended completely. And the other thing is regional health services. And of course, we all know that our hospitals have had to be prioritizing COVID treatment. So lots of routine things haven't been happening. So you've got a whole bunch of things cascading in on you there. The other thing is you've got the climate you have. So, and you've got the proximity to seafarers and sea travel. So that has all sorts of other social dynamics in terms of the homeless population and mental health and addictions challenges, which I know the mayor is seized with trying to address. And address in a way that is humane and equitable. So I appreciate that for Victoria, there's a whole lot of multiple things going on. And the one common theme that I would say we have in cities across the country is that everybody's downtown right now is pretty scary, because there's not much happening. There isn't the usual level of vitality and mix and diverse users and people going to work and people coming out of work and people going to school and people visiting family and people going shopping and people, all that stuff. And now what you have are people that have nowhere else to go, who are in, and I think this is it's just a moment of reckoning for us as urbanists, and a moment of poignancy too, that it used to disturb me in Toronto that I would go to meetings and I would, at this time of year, I'd be stepping over people that were homeless, that were sleeping on grates, and people who were rushing to meetings would be navigating around those folks. Now there's nobody rushing to the meeting, and there's more people sleeping on those grates because the shelters are closed. So it's as if COVID has exposed the underbelly of what our urban environments have been struggling with: inequality, lack of access to services, just a crisis around housing and access to supportive housing. And I know that the business community, wearies of that. They just feel, well, it's not their problem, or why can't government solve it? Well, I think COVID is explaining to all of us, it's a little teachable moment we're all having, that there's no one sector to solve one problem. All of us have to engage collectively in matching and understanding that we're in the same boat in varying different degrees. But as the commercial corridors go, as our main streets go, so does the whole city and the economy go. And we have to build up our collective muscle, our collective problem solving. As I said on the session, it's a war effort without the war. We've got to harness all our collective capacity to solve these things. And so I would say that Victoria's experience is always going to be different. It's going to be unique. But there are common themes, common elements of it in other cities across the country.
So Kathy, you have been part of the Rising Economy Task Force, which just today released Reboot, Greater Victoria's Economic Recovery Strategy. And that task force was looking at a lot of issues that Mary was just talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about the task force and that report, and where you see people are coming together to collaborate to address some of the challenges we're facing for our main streets here in the region?
Yeah, and it was a fabulous task force, just a great group of people with all sorts of different backgrounds, but within the task force that I was on, within the development real estate industry. And we were just trying to find kind of the low-hanging fruit that we would be able to act on immediately, that would make changes that would help going forward. And I think one of them for me is the municipalities listening to what the provincial government had given them, the authority to have online platforms for their public hearings and other community meetings that were necessary. And apparently, go after the emergency is lifted, we will be going back to our old ways. And UDI for sure is doing a lot of kind of advocating to the provincial government to allow the municipalities to maintain those platforms, because it just gives a wider range of options for people to attend these meetings. It just opens it up, gives for lack of better words, a little bit more democracy over who can attend. So I really hope that we're able to maintain, situations like that. I know that in the planning world, the planners are looking at how cities are built and formed. And I know for a while people were saying maybe because of this pandemic, people aren't going to want to live in dense cities. But if you look at the statistics around COVID, it's not the density of these buildings that are actually creating the outbreaks. And public transit is another issue. But I think what's going to spawn from this is it's going to create not just one main street, but there's going to be village main streets. And so you're going to have little main streets all over the place that I think will bring more vibrancy. People working from home, they want to be able to walk to get groceries, go to a restaurant, go to the doctor or whatever. And that's what these little village main streets will be able to provide.
So that's a bright spot. So Mary, your organization, the Canadian Urban Institute, you've released a toolkit, Rapid Placemaking to Bring Back Main Street, with advice for anyone working to revive their main streets and core spaces in cities, suburbs, small towns. First of all, what is Rapid Placemaking? And second, how will it help?
We did that in partnership with Happy City, which is out in Vancouver. And if nobody knows who Happy City is, they need to Google Happy City, Charles Montgomery, and have a look. They do enormous things like this. The important thing about this is that city building is actually quite, as Kathy was just suggesting, it's actually quite democratic. It's not, maybe in the old days, it was the purview of a planner or an architect or some specialist who, was paid money and worked in the government or something. But now we're all placemakers. We're all placemakers. And I think this is part of this notion that we all have some agency. I mean, some need more support than others, obviously, but the idea that we don't passively wait for government to act, we recognize that we can all get engaged. And what rapid placemaking is about is being really resourceful about what can happen more quickly. Because again, not only do Canadians tend to be passive and think government will do it, we also think, oh, it will take a long time. But COVID has really shown us that things can happen quite quickly. We can go to bike lanes quite quickly. We can have outdoor patios quite quickly. We can take booze out when we order our pizza quite quickly. So the same can be true if you have a place, if you have a schoolyard near you that is underutilized, that the school board doesn't have resources to fix up, but you've got a bunch of neighbors and you've got other kinds of stakeholders that you could engage, then sometimes out of civil society can come leadership where you go to the school board and say, we've got some ideas, we've got some resources, there's a curling club here, there's a service club there. We think the federal government might put some money in here, and you can cobble together something quite remarkable that can happen and come together more quickly. And that's maybe a more sophisticated example, working with a bunch of stakeholders, but sometimes placemaking can be something you don't need anybody's permission to do. It may be a private lot that the owner says, yeah, have at it, do what you want. It could be something that someone is waiting to develop. We all have these weird lots, like I have them in my neighborhood where that's next to an auto body shop, there's nothing happening there. If we could create an environment of permission, which is part of what the Happy City guys and the rapid placemaking tool is about, then we all start to see different kinds of possibilities. Hey, it could be a community garden. Hey, it could be a farmer's market. Hey, it could be a place where we put on little theater productions. I think this notion that we somehow are open our eyes and pay attention to opportunity and what could potentially happen, instead of having such a narrow kind of view of everything that can't happen. It's deep in our culture, right? That we're fearful that if you let people have access to a space, I don't know what we all think they're going to do in it.
But I think with that, Mary, and I completely agree with you. We need the municipalities to loosen up on their
Yeah.
regulations in order to allow that creativity to take
Let some
place.
experimentation happen. When you look at it now, I was saying in the earlier session, people are waiting to get into a patio, it's crowded, and so they have a beer standing on the street. Honestly, in my mother's Ontario, my mother's been dead 20 years, but oh no, people drinking alcohol on the street would have, but I think we have to allow ourselves to be a lot more imaginative about this. And it doesn't all have to be activities that have any risk to them. It can be movies, it can be singing contests, it can be art workshops. It's about being alive to all these different kinds of opportunities. And then the old adage, making lemons out of lemonade. We're creative. People are extraordinarily creative, and often under the most constraining circumstances, people come up with the most imaginative things. So I hope we're all paying attention like crazy to the ways. We have this website, City Share Canada. Go to citysharecanada.ca whenever you're feeling depressed and look at what people are doing. We put that up there so that people could share examples of stuff they're trying. And there's going to be tons of that. And we just have to keep listening and watching.
It was very interesting to me in the Buildback Victoria efforts, how COVID actually brought people out on Government Street here for the first time. I remember sitting at Pagliacci's and watching a jazz band, and everybody was socially distant. And for a while there, it really seemed to bring more vibrancy to the streets. Kathy, Is this something you're hoping will continue in Victoria and our region?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think Mary suggested this before. I mean, Victoria, we have the climate here, not like, like Toronto, they get the snow. We very, very seldom get snow. And so I think we do have an opportunity here where we can allow things like that to happen. And like you suggested, we got things done really quickly. And it shows that, government, the different levels of government, even the provincial and the federal government, the programs that they put in place for COVID, like they had these things happening within weeks, like a couple weeks after we went into lockdown. So we know that these things can happen quickly. And with what Victoria's done with Government Street and like Broad Street, you were mentioning, Carrie, with Pagliacci's, it really does. It just brings so much more vibrancy back, gets the people out onto the street where they should be.
And some of it'll work and some of it won't.
Yeah.
And we just let's give ourselves permission that we're gonna, if everything we're doing is working, we're probably not trying enough stuff.
True.
Some will work, some won't. But this is part of and this is why you keep it small. Pilots are small, so that if it doesn't work, you can quickly pull it back. Right.
I love that. And Mary, I actually read a quote, I think it was attributed to you, that said, "The health of our main streets is linked to the health of our cities and our sense of community and well-being." And I understand there's some studies that actually show how happiness is linked to Main Street. Can you
Mhm.
comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is about attachment and belonging. All the psychologists amongst us, all the parents amongst us know how critically important it is that we as human beings have a sense of attachment and belonging. And in big cities and in small cities, that main street is the opportunity for you to have a sense of identity and belonging, that you go and you get a cup of coffee from someone, or you have a tailor that you deal with, or you have a food bank that you visit, or whatever it is, that this is how you form a sense of your own identity. And then you attach, people's a sense of citizenship is completely linked to their sense of their immediate environment. So there couldn't be anything more profoundly important in Canada than giving people an opportunity to have a sense of attachment and belonging. And that's what Main Streets are doing. And I think putting us in this extraordinary moment, we're not attaching and belonging through Netflix, as much as I personally love Netflix. That is not the ticket. The ticket is me having some kind of transactional engagement with my neighbors and with people making a living and providing various services and goods and experiences that we collectively share. This is the reason we live in cities, is that we can have experiences and access to things together that we couldn't have alone.
Yeah.
Well,
And
as much as I would love to engage with you both in person, I am so grateful to have you both here today. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion, and I hope, can you tell us the website again? City Care.
City Share. Go to
citycare.ca.
you can go to canurb.org and it's all there, but citysharecanada.ca and bringbackmainstreet.ca, all under the umbrella of the Canadian Urban Institute.
That's great. And it's a pleasure to have you both here today. And it's very comforting to know there's so many smart minds looking at our cities. And I really look forward to seeing our Main Streets come back to life. I want to thank CHEK today for putting us in the spotlight.